Okay, this is a weird one, I think.
Every order, resolution, or vote to which the concurrence of the Senate and House of Representatives may be necessary, except on a question of adjournment, shall be presented to the President of the United States, and before the same shall take effect, shall be approved by him, or being disapproved by him, shall be repassed by 2/3 of the Senate and House of Representatives, according to the rules and limitations prescribed in the case of a bill. So they're allowed to go home without the president's approval, which is nice. But other than that, everything they pass has to go through the president. This is one of the balance of powers issues. So Congress is not the only authority for laws. Constitutionally speaking, and we'll get to that, but constitutionally speaking, Congress is the final authority for passing laws because they can override a veto, but they are not the only authority because the president has to sign everything or have his veto overridden, which is difficult.
So again, we're back to the 2/3 thing.
We're back to the 2/3 thing, but this is another one of the founding fathers' fears of tyranny, and that is fairly close to a universal because you can see not wanting anyone to have the ultimate authority written through the entire document. The founding fathers would have known their history, especially their, to them, quite recent history. Granted, none of them were alive during some of the worst conflicts between, well, obviously the worst conflict between the monarchy and Parliament would have been when Parliament had Charles I executed.
Was at that point was over 100? Was more than 100 years before that point.
Right. So that wasn't even for most of them in their grandparents' living memory. But it shapes so much of American history, that fear of tyranny. And they weren't exactly thrilled with George III, who was quietly suffering from probably porphyria in England right about this time. And George IV was constantly in conflict with Parliament over money. He had a very generous allowance that he blew through very quickly. And so you see in the Constitution this awareness of where things, what had been happening in England over the last couple of centuries, and a concept of how can we prevent that kind of thing from happening here. And to be strictly fair, they did prevent a lot of what was happening in England from happening in the United States. It's just that they didn't predict other bad things that could happen in the United States. And one of them, John Adams, knew was an issue and knowingly punted down the road because there was no way he personally could have stopped it. Because it's the slavery thing.
Be like, yeah, like we'll let the next person deal with it. Let the next person deal with it. Let the next person deal with it.
John Adams wanted to deal with it, but it was either deal with it or have a country, and he chose to have a country. So, it's hard to blame him. It's just that it wasn't great further down the road, and it wasn't great at the time for all of the people held in slavery in those days.
Yeah, I wonder what the Civil War would have been like if it was between the 13 states instead of the...
We wouldn't have had a country. It would have been far too easy for any major European power to swoop in and take over some of those colonies. And they all knew it. That's the other major fear that you can see written through the Constitution. We have to stick together, or else we don't have a country. But it's going to be a country with no tyrant.
Yes, spoilers for unless this episode's uploaded after we do the record January 1st, but this will be we haven't seen it yet. We talked about the balance of power then.
Yeah. We'll get to balance of power in a live stream, but balance of power exists a lot in this country because of Charles the First.